Hey guys, in this video, I want to share with you how you could overcome the fear of rejection. And this draws from tools from psychotherapy. However, this is not simply theoretical. This is coming from my own personal experience because I used to be someone who was deathly afraid of the fear of rejection. In fact, back in college, I took a social psychology class and there were more than 200 students in the class. And I had the highest score for fear of rejection out of all of the students. Years later, I was able to do a TEDx talk and speak in front of 800 people. And I also did a social experiment in which I went to Bryant Park in New York City and I put a sign that said 5-minute date. And I went on 5-minute dates with people. So how was I able to become much more resilient when it comes to rejection? I'm going to share with you how. And the thing is, later on, when I became a psychotherapist, I was able to point to the tools that are able to help me the most. When I'm looking back at my journey, it was a difficult journey when it comes to overcoming my fear. But I saw certain kind of themes that tended to help me. And I want to be able to share this with you. Now, a key to overcoming the fear of rejection is to know that it's better to work on this fear a step at a time. Focus on one reasonable challenge at a time before moving on to the next. You don't want to overwhelm yourself. And when you do so, when you could focus on one challenge and repeat it, for instance, the focus could be making eye contact with people, or the focus could be having a long conversation with others, or asking someone for a kind of request. If you could kind of just focus on one thing at a time and repeat it, what happens is that you're slowly retraining your brain over time. Your brain keeps getting exposed to a new worldview that is not focused on rejection and holding oneself back. When there's more and more positive responses to this, the brain starts to rewire itself. Remember to take it a step at a time, and along the way, talk to yourself in a compassionate, kind, and encouraging voice, because the more you do so, it becomes easier and easier to do these challenges. I'm speaking from personal experience. I think it's very natural for people who fear rejection to have a harsh, critical inner voice. And the thing is, we might think that voice motivates us, but it becomes really exhausting and a burden over time. The more we take it easier on ourselves while still being mindful and consistent with our goals and talking to ourselves in a compassionate way, what that's going to do is help maintain your motivation to keep going. Plus, you're retraining your inner voice so that it's less and less rejecting. What happens is that the inner world gets projected outwards, such as if we're focused on the inner critical voice, it'll seem more and more that the outer world is critical. But the more we're focused on a compassionate voice within, we'll see more opportunities out in the world. Of course, living with the inner critical voice is difficult, especially if you have a fear of rejection. The first key is to talk to your inner critic in a compassionate way. And I have a video about how you could do that up above. So I'll give you two specific examples of challenges in terms of overcoming the fear of rejection. And you could, of course, design your own. The first one is maybe useful for people with social anxiety. And the second one may be useful for anybody who wants to overcome the fear of rejection in general. So in the first case, this is actually coming from my own example. My social anxiety was so severe that even when I was walking around, I felt like people were judging me. So what happened was that I always kept my head down and not look at people at all when I go out on my walks. To challenge myself, what I focused on was to look up and look at people, not making sustained eye contact with them, but just looking around, looking at people, and just doing so for 20 seconds and allowing myself to look away. This is what I mean by taking it easy on yourself, being compassionate on yourself, and doing things a step at a time. Because when you put a lot of pressure on yourself, it becomes very hard to do. And what I did was that I just looked up a little bit and I looked back down, and then I looked up for longer periods of time and I looked back down. And what happens is that over time that retrained my brain, and I start to realize, hey, people are not really paying attention to me at all. So in this second example was a couple of years later, I really want to take my challenges really up to the next level. So when there's a group setting and there's somebody hosting the group, for instance, or they're on a stage and then they're asking for volunteers or they're asking if people have any sort of questions, I made it a challenge that I would always raise my hand and do it before anybody else. And at first, this was a very nerve-wracking experience, but the more I did it, the more I tried. And maybe in the beginning, I'll only do this, but then I really went up there and really tried to raise my hand. The more I did it, the more that pattern became automatic, so that I wasn't even thinking about it. Whenever the host is asking a question or asking for a volunteer, my hand immediately shot up. I really just focused on that one action and not really thought too much about it. And what happens is that actually trained my brain. So even though internally I was saying, no, I don't really want to do this, the action became so automatic that my hand just shot up regardless. Now, of course, you don't have to use the specific examples that I've provided. Use these examples and create your own challenges. But you can see how I went from one challenge to a higher challenge. I went from looking up when I'm walking to always volunteering myself first. And the key is to keep repeating, keep doing it over and over again, because this is going to retrain how your brain looks at things. You lean into the new behavior and do it a bit more over time, and then verbalize what are your internal tendencies. Ask yourself, is this situation threatening to you? How may I be bringing in the past? And what's another way to look at what other people are thinking about in this situation? Give other people the benefit of the doubt. So the more you do this, the more your brain will look at alternative explanations and to see that you're actually truly safe, and to be really kind to yourself, because it takes time to do this. It takes time to have this exposure and to talk yourself through it. But over time, it gets easier and easier. And then you could raise the bar when it comes to the challenges. It's really normal that we experience instinctual automatic reactions based on the past. So for example, for me, when I go into social situations, it was really normal for me to notice all these negative thoughts that are swimming in my head and telling me I should just get out of here. I shouldn't even attend in the first place. But the more I kept attending anyway, the more I became an observer of my thoughts. The negative thoughts almost became like a given. Like I just kind of expect, oh, they're going to be there, but I'm going to do this anyway. Just like with raising my hand, my body started to automatically ignore what my thoughts were saying. Learning how to overcome the fear of rejection is like a lot of other skills. However, it could be a very emotional process. So that's why it's important to take it easy. You're going to have your ups, you're going to have your lows, you're going to have your ups, and you're going to have your lows. But when you're at your lows, it could really feel like with 100% intensity that, wow, I have not made any progress whatsoever. And I've definitely been there before, especially when it came to the process of overcoming my own fear of rejection. I want to tell you, if you stick with it and become persistent, you'll see yourself through. Over time, you're allowing your brain to marinate into a new way of looking at things. And it becomes easier and easier to see things from the perspective of, I'm here to learn. I'm here to be able to grow and become better. And the process becomes much, much more intrinsic and internal. At first, that's not easy at all. It kind of really feels like an external kind of pressure, like this is something I have to do. It could be really stressful. For sure. The more you commit yourself to it, the more it becomes internal. The more you're seeing this as an opportunity in its own sake to get better. And what you find is that you could even enter into the state of seeing yourself objectively, getting into the habit of seeing yourself objectively and not taking the process personally. And it really helps to become more and more curious about yourself and see like, what are some areas I can improve and what are some areas that I could do better in? Again, this is a process. At first, I could take this really personally myself, and I had been for a very long time. But the more I get back into the mindset of, objectively looking at myself and seeing how I could improve, the better it gets. If you get into the habit of pushing yourself too hard, I want to let you know that I've written an article about this. And in that article, I talked about how I pushed myself really hard when it comes to overcoming my severe social anxiety. And I found that when I let go of pushing myself hard, it actually became much easier to become sociable. It became much easier to overcome my social anxiety. And you could read that article below in the description box. And it's on my website, leonsautherapy.com, where you can also find other articles on mental wellness, mental resilience, and also cultivating your own mental calmness and centeredness as well. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you could join me in my next video.